In Congress, nothing happens overnight.
James Moylan is exactly the kind of guy we need in Congress.
I'm especially thankful for your work to re-elect my great friend, James Moylan.
He is a fierce fighter for the people of Guam and a strong leader in the halls of Congress.
Send back a strong voice for Guam in Washington, and that voice is James Moylan.
For 4 years, I built the relationships, trust, and momentum we need to move Guam's priorities forward. Now, we're advancing a Guam passport office, a VA regional office, and the fight to expand visa-free travel from the Philippines. We passed legislation through the House to expand in-state tuition opportunities and better serve our disabled veterans. And I'm fighting outdated shipping and airline restrictions that make it more expensive to live, travel, and raise a family on Guam. And we helped secure nearly $56 million in community project funding for Guam. But some of our biggest fights aren't finished. And starting over now means losing precious time. So let's keep Guam moving forward. Now, I'm James Moylan, a candidate for Congress, and I approve this message.
My parents, Ben Diaz and Teresita Bora Ada, founded Ada's Mortuary more than 50 years ago. They built a legacy of service, compassion, and respect. As one of 10 children, I watched them care for families during the hardest moments of their lives. They taught us that the people we served were never just customers. They were grieving families who needed someone to listen, care, and help them through one of life's hardest moments. My father carried those values into public service as a senator. He taught me that whether you are helping one family or serving an entire island, leadership begins with compassion. Those lessons have guided my life and public service. If I'm given the privilege to serve as your governor, they will continue to guide every decision I make. I humbly ask for your vote. I'm Tony Ada, and I approve this message.
Hafa day. You all know me. I've been your senator, former speaker, businesswoman, lawyer, educator, and I am a mother. And I've spent my working life fighting for truth and justice for the people of Guam. As your governor, I will continue to fight for your families, and I will deliver a government that you can trust. This is a critical time for Guam, and we need change now. Our families are struggling and cannot wait. Please vote for us this election to bring that change that Guam needs.
I'm Therese Terlahi.
And I'm Sabina Perez, and we approve this message.
I'm kind of in a hurry because I have to do certain things, but that's why we're having this show early. It is now 5:27 p.m. on Friday, July 31, 2026. And one of the reasons I'm in a hurry is because I just come from the traffic that was Dedido. And, you know, ever since I've been involved in politics, like as a campaigner, right, I loved that. My favorite thing to do was to knock on doors, the canvassing, walk door to door, and like just talk to the voters and answer their questions or write down their concerns. Like that's I loved that stuff, right? Yeah, the communication stuff was you know, that was all right. That was fine. And some of the stuff I didn't like, right? But what I hated so much were fundraisers. Number one, I like hardly ever went to the fundraisers, and waves. And like the waves were always the mandatory thing. Yeah, it's mandatory. You have to go to the wave or you're going to get in trouble, right? No matter who it was, no matter what gubernatorial campaign it was, because they wanted a show of force and all this stuff, right? And I always hated it because as we were waving at people, you could always see the disgust in their eyes, like no matter who the gubernatorial candidate was. But I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of people honked, right? Like for Felix Camacho, for Eddie Calvo, for Tony and Pinko, people were honking. I remember for Lulian Girl when she was running, a lot of honking, right? Like, anyway, so I've always hated it because it causes traffic, and also it's hot when you're a waiver, and but you just knowing that you're inconveniencing the lives of so many people as they're just trying to get home because they had a hard day at work. It's Friday. They don't want to deal with your BS. They don't, you know, maybe they need to use the bathroom. Maybe they're in a hurry to go shopping so that they can get food, so they can cook because the kids are hungry. Like all these different considerations that the politicians never really make when they have these I call them dumb waves. Like I hate those waves, right? So I was passing by, and because I it was my route. Like I couldn't. There was no shortcut unless I went through the back road to Anderson, and I was, that area in front of like 76, Papa John's, Bank Pacific, and Dededo Route 1. That's where there was a gubernatorial team doing a wave there. And the traffic was stopped. It was at a snail's pace because of, and it was 4:30 p.m. or like almost 5 p.m. And I noticed something as I was going through that for several minutes. I noticed there wasn't a single honk. Like nobody in any, like the hundreds of cars that were there. And it's not like we're passing by, we were stopped, like we're at a snail's pace, whether it was the traffic light or being red or because everything was just going really slow. There was no honking, and I was like, oh, this is different. I'd be concerned if I was this campaign. So anyway, tonight, Kandit, there are many issues that present themselves in this island, some of which we cover. And right now it's 5:30 p.m. on Friday, July 31, 2026, with the polls opening. If I'm doing my math right, in 13 and a half hours, 7 a.m. tomorrow. What we want to do is go back to our core. And our core from the beginning, even before we became professional, even before we became serious about this whole news agency, even before that, our core had always been the fight against corruption. And so tonight, with less than 13 and a half hours left to the opening of the polls at the elections. And by the way, there's something going around. One of the gubernatorial teams had flyers printed, and according to Dededo residents, and we have the pictures to prove it, right? We're sending out flyers that say that the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., which is not true. Could have been a typo. I don't know. But that could lead to voter suppression if there are voters who do not know from what time to what time the polls open. Someone said, like, if you don't know what time the polls are open, then you're part of the problem, which is stupid because I didn't know what time to what time the polls were open, and I'm in the news. I had to call the election commission because I couldn't see it on their website. And I had to call them to verify, hey, from what time to what time are the polls open? Because that's not something that I carry in my mind, like that I know that the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., right? So I had to call the election commission to verify it. Hey, what time are you guys open tomorrow? Is it 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.? They said yes. But not everybody's going to know what time the polls are open. Not everybody's going to know from what time to what time the polls are open. Not everyone even knows where their polling station is. Like, this is information that needs to get out there. And when there's information that's wrong, it needs to be called out and combated, because otherwise it's going to suppress votes. And that's the last thing that we want to happen. We want everybody who is registered to vote to go out and to vote. And so whenever there's information that's wrong, it's our job to correct it. Sorry, I don't care how offended you get just because you're supporting that one team. Makes no difference to me. So we go back to our core, right? And our core is the fight against corruption. And to present the gubernatorial candidates to you, and there's one gubernatorial team so Ada Calvo, we weren't able to interview them. And this is the only reason that they're not included in this, is because we don't have material. We don't have the content to present to you. If they do prevail in the primary, they told us that we can interview them, and so we'll be able to have that content then, if they prevail. But on the others, on the Democratic side, I'm not going to bring you the piece from. We already played the interview that we had in December of 2023 with Josh Tenorio. That campaign is a behemoth campaign that has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars already on commercials. I'm not going to give that campaign a platform here, especially when they don't answer our questions about corruption, especially when there are so many concerns about corruption from that campaign. So tonight, we're going to present to you The candidates who have answered, who have conducted interviews with us, or who've allowed us to conduct interviews with them, and their answers about corruption in this island. And it starts with Blas Okada, then Terlahi Perez, and then San Augustine, San Nicolas, and we will get to those on the other side of the commercial break. Stick with us.
Over the course of this campaign, I've learned that the people of Guam don't expect their leaders to be perfect. They expect them to be honest, accountable, and above all, keep their word to the people they serve. Those are the values that have guided my leadership and embodied the Republican Party I want to help lead. I believe good leadership starts with getting the basics right. That means respecting taxpayer dollars, making responsible decisions, and holding ourselves accountable. When our government delivers the right way, we build stronger families, grow successful businesses, and create a brighter future for Guam. Because that's the kind of government you deserve, and that's the commitment the Adat Calvo team makes to you and your family. We will say what we mean, do what we say, and always keep our word to the people of Guam. I humbly ask for your vote. I'm Tony Atta.
Hey, I'm Therese Terlahi. You know me, I'm your senator, former speaker, businesswoman, lawyer, educator, and I'm a mother. I've spent my working life fighting for truth and justice for the people of Guam, and as your governor, I will continue to fight for your families and deliver a government that Guam can trust.
Hafaday, I'm Sabina Perez, familia in Gozo and Cabeza. I've utilized my diverse background as a medical technologist, diabetes researcher, community organizer, and Simon Sanchez teacher to craft data-driven solutions to long-standing issues. As your lieutenant governor, I intend to advance the beautification of our island and to not return federal funds that support our families. We are running to deliver urgent relief to families who are struggling on Guam from the high cost of living and to improve the quality of life.
We assure you that your interests, not special interests, will be prioritized, that corruption will be replaced with honesty, true transparency, and a willingness to listen to our community.
Please vote Terlahi Perez for Governor and Lieutenant Governor of Guam.
A vote for us is a vote for Guam.
I am Therese Terlahi.
And I'm Sabina Perez, and we approve this message.
This past year, we've been focused on moving Guam forward, strengthening oversight in our schools, supporting our veterans, standing up for students and families, and working on policies that open doors for our people. For me, public service has never been about headlines. It's about showing up, listening carefully, and doing the work that matters. There's still more to accomplish, and I'm ready to keep pushing ahead. I'm Senator Vince Borja, and I humbly ask for your continued support.
First off, I come from a background of actually fighting corruption at the front end. Okay? I have arrested, when I was in the police department, I've arrested police officers. When I was in the cabinet, and as part of the administration, I fired cabinet members. Okay? I don't tolerate that. I can't tolerate that because you ultimately hold the trust that the people have. Okay, as governor and lieutenant governor, we need to make sure that our people represent us the best way they can, and the most truthful way they can. You cannot tolerate corruption in any form, and it will not be tolerated. There was a question that was asked of us yesterday. What about the corruption in the past? Recognizing that there are laws that may restrict in some cases or limit when we can go after them, but if we can go after them, we'll go after them. I think also in the legislature, you see, okay,
Are you guys going to pursue, because I remember Senator Duane is talking about opening up a blue ribbon panel to investigate corruption in the current administration. Is that something that you...
Well, you see, and with all due respect with Senator Chris, there are certain things that the legislature has the power and the ability to be able to do. Okay? We do not have basically criminal adjudication powers. In the executive branch, though, okay, where your powers are much different from what exists in the legislature, okay, I want to say there's more latitude and more flexibility for us to be able to do this. Okay, first off, we won't tolerate it, okay, and if it gets to that point, before you get arrested, I don't mind, I'm going to fire you. We're going to fire you because that's not going to be tolerated in our administration.
Dr. Okada.
So I have come across, of course, not incidences that are of great magnitude, but we follow the procurement process at GCC. We've been successful. Our audits have been clean. There have been some minor incidents maybe, and corrective action is taken immediately. And so, I mean, if there's something wrong with the procurement process, the current process works for us. It's the same process everybody else uses, but it requires a lot of planning. You can't just put out a request for a proposal 2 weeks before you need the services or before you need the products. And so that requires a lot of planning. So early on with our procurement office, one of the first things I did is get a whiteboard and tell me every contract that's expiring and back it up, how many months it's going to take you to renew it, and work it appropriately, because we can't be in a situation where we're in the best interest of the government to move a procurement forward that is rushed, because that's not how it's supposed to work. So we have the employees look at their systems to figure out how they can improve their processes so that we don't get caught up against a wall. Last thing I need is to find out of, something in the news. And so, we put safeguards in place and make sure that, people are aware of what their responsibilities are and held accountable when something goes awry.
So GCC might be, and to your credit, of course, as the leader of GCC this whole time, right? GCC might be one of those rare examples of a professional government agency that has probably not experienced what the rest of the government of Guam experiences. Do you recognize that at least throughout the remainder of the government of Guam, there absolutely has been a perennial issue, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or a Republican who is in Adelup, and it doesn't always come from Adelup, that there are problems with cronyism, with bid rigging, with political patronage that goes from Adelup or somewhere else. It's just such an entrenched problem within the government of Guam that it skews the public's confidence in, the capacity of the government and its leaders to do things honestly. Is this something that you recognize happens?
So I can only say that I, read it in the news and people bring things forward.
But you hear it from people, right?
I hear it from some people, but, and then I go back and say, well, what was it in that solicitation that made it convenient? I review every scope of work for GCC before it goes out. Every scope of work. I don't have the expertise in all of this, but there's certain consistencies that I look for in terms of how much time do they have to, how clear are our specifications.
You think you'll be able to?
I think they see, well, first of all, I think they're struggling, most of them, and that they feel like the government is not necessarily helping them, but they can see that the government is very much helping, some others, and not on a fair basis. So I think that that's prevalent. They feel like hiring is not fair, and they feel like contracts are not necessarily fair. And I think, so that's why they feel it a lot, and particularly because they are struggling as well to keep up with the cost of living.
Yeah, I think I agree with that statement. I think a lot of times when hiring, these high-level hirings happen, people already know who's going to get picked, and and they feel that it's already decided versus it being based on merit. And so we see above step hirings happen when there was no reason for that, because they could have followed competitive hiring practices. I've seen it through my oversight of agencies too, where there's this use of what's called detailed assignment, where an individual who's at an entry level gets to be promoted. And that promotion is continuously done. Even though it's 180 days, they found a way to get around it. So obviously there's issues with the getting around the merit hiring. And so that has a morale. It really affects morale, affects the services of the agencies, because, it's not really, basically it hurts morale, it hurts productivity.
How have you heard that let's stick to this issue of hiring in the government of Guam, right? And also employment in the government of Guam. How do you understand this affects those employees in the rank and file who do not get these types of preferential treatments?
Well, of course, the morale, as Senator Perez said, and I think when they don't feel like they're being recognized, their work, and it's really sad because some of them are longtime employees, very hardworking, but if they don't feel like their work is being recognized, then they're not going to care that much about it anymore. And so I'm afraid that's what we're beginning to see. Those who are just getting discouraged and feeling like they're not going to do their best because the government's not recognizing their best. We've actually passed laws. We want to see these things, so we made it open. You have to show, detailed hiring. You have to give the legislature notice now of above step hiring, just so that there's a record, because otherwise the record, you put it up for 10 days and it can disappear. No one has to see it. But we really want to focus on merit-based hiring.
What's your understanding of the complaints that government and Guam employees have about preferential treatment that they're not getting? And whether it's complaints made in the public realm or maybe quietly made because people are afraid, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I've brought it to the attention of the directors, and unfortunately there wasn't any resolution. So in the case of DRT, there was hiring, limited term of hirings, and they were not qualified for those positions. And so what happens is that the ones that are within the agency that know how to do the work are training the one that was just hired, and they're getting a higher pay. So it really hurts morale, it hurts productivity, and that cumulative impact within the agency, and also that affects the services to our people. So this is something that Senator Teresa and I would like to change. We want to change that system. We want to go back to upholding the merit system and having proper successional planning, so people are, satisfied with their work environment, which has a direct impact on the services to our people.
How would you make this change? How would you convince, or if you're elected governor and lieutenant governor, what will you do that will help to convince regular rank and file employees who just go to work every day to do their job that this is an administration that's going to be fair for them, and that when they do the right things at an excellent level, they're going to be rewarded, and that when they are not doing the right things, they're going to be disciplined and it's going to be fair?
Well, I think we should, of course, make it very clear. We have openings in the government, for example, in these critical social work, right, CPS, yet we still are hiring limited term. And so we need to show them the pathway that they're, for social workers, we want to recruit them, we want to retain them, we want to show them there's a pathway that you can, grow in the government. And we need to really prioritize that. So show that, make that, those announcements broader, more known and fair when they are actually implemented. But it's really the limited hiring. There's so much of it, it feels like right now, or at least that's what I hear. So the longtime employees feel like, they're training others to take over their jobs, as opposed to, they get promoted to do additional work.
Yeah, and the people that we hire in the cabinet, we want to make sure that they are, being fair and professional and ethical in how they do their job. So it really starts from the top. One of the things that I included in the budget bill, so there was an amendment to the performance-based budgeting to ensure that there's training in regards to organizational evaluation to see what is the capacity needed to fulfill the mandates of the agency, and as well as what is needed for successional planning, which is a deficiency within our government. As you can see, if you look at our budget, we keep, there's a section in the bill where we allow for those that retired to come back to the agencies. And that's really a symptom of our lack of successional planning. And so there's already amendments and laws in place that we just need to follow through.
Thank you for bringing up the appointment of a cabinet. What would your cabinet look like? How would you select them? And how will you, or will you allow the people of Guam to view the selection process and be along every step of the way?
Well, I think we're definitely going to open it so that they can all apply. And but I feel like, for me, I have a basic criteria that is, you need to be willing to kind of do it the way we're describing. You need to be open. You need to be able to discuss these things with people who ask you in your own agency and people who ask you from the media. It has to be open. I don't like gag orders. I feel like all these governments where we've had gag orders on these directors, that's a disaster to me. That's one thing very prevalent right now, it seems. Everything has to go through a certain person in order just to be told, even to a senator. We can't get the actual facts until they're censored. And I don't want that. I think the people should know all the facts. We're trying to put these all up online as much as possible, financial facts, procurement facts. But yes, so openness, transparency, they've got to be kind of experts in that and be able and willing to do that.
Experts in transparency and
yes, yes, open government for sure. I don't want any, there's no reason to bypass that unless there's an emergency. We have, very limited emergencies. We should be planning more.
Yeah, and if we can expand the discussion about corruption, right? So the other area is procurement, right? And so when I first started my career in the 35th Guam legislature, one of the first things I had to do was the oversight of the quarantine facilities, where they circumvented the procurement law. And emergency procurement really is just 3 quotes. So that's the simplest and easiest way to get procurement, and how did they botch that one? And so the problem, I think, is really there is a disconnect with what government procurement is and what private procurement is. There's a distinction because with public procurement, we have to ensure that vital taxpayer dollars is being safeguarded. We can't just go out and buy something at the store. We have to show how we went about this business of procuring a service or good or construction. And so that was one of the things that I saw was the really dismissal of procurement procedures, and that has continued to this day. And really, when we had when I attended the chamber conference on procurement, they just want to be treated fairly. They want to know what is the standard operating procedure when it comes to procurement. And from what I could see, there is no standard. And
well, I believe what they're referring to is folks stealing from the government or stealing from the people of Guam, and that's got to end. I mean, there are checks, there's do's and don'ts. There are processes. There is a system that should intervene when attempts are made, but when there's nobody watching that, it's like the rooster's not watching the hen house. Come on. For me, it's quite simple, because being a prior military or retired from the military, that's what we do. We have SOPs, we have internal controls. I worked as a tax investigator. I was a compliance supervisor. There are checks to prevent somebody from stealing. It's just like when we do inspection at bars and stores. We know when we went in there, empty pockets. When we come back, empty pockets. When we confiscate things, we do inventory right on the spot. So we know what we took and what we're going to destroy. And we go through that process. And as long as there's the people in control, maintain control, the corruption shouldn't exist. And then again, it just depends on what level of corruption we're talking about.
Let's talk about that. What are those levels of corruption that you think the Guamanian people recognize?
Well, I think it's almost like the Simon Sanchez thing. They believe that there's corruption there because there's a payoff for one of the bidders. I believe that when they put out the bid was very specific. Once you exceed the amount, they shouldn't have entertained the bid no more. There was an amount, there was a threshold, and then move on from there. And if you don't like the people bidding, rebid it. Because why? The children, the folks in Jigo have waited. I was on the board in 2007. We've been trying to build a school. I got elected. I've been trying to figure out a way, the mechanism to build a school. And then what happened? Then there was supposedly corruption. There's payoff. Why is there payoff? Why does any business need a payoff? You win the bid, you move on in the bid, there shouldn't be any payoff. There shouldn't be a kickback. And then there should be mechanisms to make sure there's no kickback. Then you got revenue and tax that would get involved, because there's money movement. You can trace money. No matter how you put it, you can trace the money. And I'm a firm believer that the people of Guam are tired of this. And for our administration, it will not exist. And if it does exist, we will fix it just as fast as it happened. It appears, right? We're not going to wait for like the civil service, right? When and should you have known? We should have known the day it went out. We should have known when the process started. We should have known everything we should know. And you know, I've heard from other candidates that they said, well, we did it here. GovGuam is not the same as an agency. GovGuam is bigger. So you got to be able to invest in the so-called right people, but we got to be very careful too. I mean, I think on one of our forums, I mentioned, they asked me what would be the worst thing you would say. I said, you're fired. And the reason why I said that is because if we gave you all the rules, you know, to engage in government business and you failed, then you should be fired. And when you're fired, you're literally gone. It's not a, you know, you terminate it, we're going to move you to another office and guess and hope that you do better. No, 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 no. When we terminate you, you're gone. Now, if you're going to come back, there's a process now. You know, because everybody has a second chance in life. Maybe even hopefully not get to third, but give the second chance, but they got to go to, and not go back to where they came from. There's a reason why we moved you out or we terminated you from there. And then we move from there. And maybe Dwayne can comment more, because he's a former customs officer, because he knows what corruption is all about too.
Well, before we get to your experience as a customs officer, let me regarding your thoughts on what the average Romanian talks about when they say the government is corrupt. What about your thoughts as a businessman who deals with cargo?
First of all, let me explain that the values of not taking anything that doesn't belong to you started real young. My father, I was coming home from elementary school and I was bouncing a basketball. And he goes, Hafa, Tuliana, where did you get that? I said, Dad, I got it at the stop sign. And he goes, stop sign bola. Go put it back because it's not yours. And the stop sign didn't give birth to that ball. And he says, put it back because it's not yours. So these are deeply ingrained things. You know, like I said, I always say this, that, everything I do is built on trust. I have to fire people in my business because of breach of trust. It's a very important thing for me. You breach the trust, not only for us, but for the people that we're trying to provide services to, And so it's a very, very important thing. I will not tolerate corruption. And I truly, truly believe this is the way I feel. And there's no room for that. The people of Guam are going to give you this trust. I'm always about happiness. I always want to make people happy. And the basis of that is building trust with people and not breaching that trust. And taking something that is not yours just ruins the reputation of the administration, and it ruins the reputation of the leaders. People are looking to us, both of us, to a lot of people everywhere I go, placing their hopes and dreams and trust in us. And that's the last thing I want to do, is to breach that and destroy that trust. But there's several incidents when I was a customs officer. Let me give you an example. When we went to go clear this container, and I just arrived there, and one of the customs officers says, "Hey sir, don't worry, I got it. I got us 2 hours." I said, "How did you do that? We didn't even do anything yet." I said, "No, this is not right. We're gonna go back in there, and we're gonna scratch out all that stuff that you did, and we're gonna do the right thing. When you see that document, you're gonna see all the scratches out, because I wasn't gonna tolerate that." But when I heard that from that officer, I really literally wanted to, vomit, because it was just not right. It's not right. And so
what happened to that fellow officer?
Well, he continued on with his foolishness, and he ended up going to jail for it. Going to jail for corruption.
Okay, so I know who this officer is. Okay.
And so, and it's funny because when
that was a big federal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you're principled, right? I was the one who was, looked down on, and that was,
Who looked down on you?
Everybody else, because you're supposed to be protecting this guy, but I wasn't going to tolerate that. And there was another incident where another officer came in and put a time that wasn't his, slipped it into the box, and one of my guys caught it. He says, "Sir, there's a guy who put in hours that he didn't work." And I said, "Oh, really?" So I ended up writing this guy up, and I got you know, I got ostracized a little bit for it, because the thin blue line or whatever it is, right? But I stood up for what is right, because at the end of the day, people, it's trust, it's my reputation. I'm not going to ruin that, and I'm not going to let anybody ruin that for me or for our team and our reputation. That's why we always guard what we say, because people are watching. There's a lot of kids who look up to me. We just were waving the other day, and it's wonderful when they roll down their window and the kids are waving at you. They appreciate what you're doing, and so they're watching us. And I don't want to let them down.
You talked about our culture in the 1980s. I'm guessing we're the same. So I know it's the 1980s.
Yes. I miss the 80s.
So in the 1980s, the culture was, if it doesn't belong to you, you don't take it.
You don't take
it. You
it.
don't touch it. You don't take it.
Touch it. You don't take it.
But there's also another culture, and it's pervasive. It's not just in the government of Guam, but it is something that's pervasive in our culture, and it goes something like this: that when you tell your friend that, hey, I don't know why, but I got paid 2 extra hours.
Yeah.
And I didn't work those hours. And your friend says, "Oh, you're lucky, sweaty."
Yeah.
You're lucky. Or on the other side of it is you, for instance, what you did. You tell your friend, I'm gonna turn this guy in because it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And your friend says, "Are you stupid? You're gonna get in trouble." Or, "This is just how it is. You gotta play the game."
That's wrong.
When you're principled, right? When you're principled, you start off as a principled person. You're not gonna, and your values, you're not gonna stray from that, especially when you're firm and you're.
Even if it goes against the times.
Even if it goes against the times, I've done that before many times, and it's because if I'm gonna err, it's gonna err on good, always good. There's a reason why they call me Mr. Goodman. Because if I'm going to err, if I'm going to make a mistake, it's going to be to the benefit of others, or you know what I'm saying. And so that's how I've always done my thing. That's how I always ran my business. That's how I there's a point when you were young, but in the course of time, you're building up your character, you're building up your reputation, and it takes a long time to build up a wonderful reputation, and only one minute, and you ruin your reputation.
Forever.
That's right. And that's something I cannot live with. I don't want to go there. I don't want to do it.
It's like lying. When everybody, and Dwayne would always tell me, says, Joe, I hate politics. I says, and my background is, my father's been in politics. I never really cared for politics, because why? I just didn't like the taste of it. I'd always have to work the politics.
Makes me sick to my stomach sometimes.
But I don't really care for it too much, because if it's wrong, it's wrong. It doesn't matter if it's